The galactic research vessel Prudent Curiosity hung in low Earth orbit, its sensors whirring with confusion as they attempted to make sense of the blue planet below. Chief Scientist Krill X stared at the readout screens, his 4 eye stalks twitching in disbelief. "This can't be correct," he muttered, using one of his secondary appendages to adjust the sensitivity settings for the 3rd time. "Plax, come look at these readings." Junior Research Assistant Plax bounded over, nearly knocking over a shelf of carefully catalogued specimens in his enthusiasm. "Yes, Chief Scientist? Have we found something interesting about primitive planet 3742b? "Interesting is an understatement," Krill X said, pointing at the screen with 2 different appendages for emphasis. "According to these scans, the entire planet is contaminated with deadly organic compounds. The readings are off the charts. There are regions where the toxicity levels exceed our measurement capabilities." Plax's natural bioluminescence flickered with excitement. "Perhaps this explains why we haven't detected any advanced civilizations. It must be an uninhabitable death world." "That was my first thought too, but look at this." Krill X brought up another screen, this one showing thermal and electromagnetic readings. "There's clear evidence of technological development. Cities, transportation networks, communication systems, someone or something is living down there." "Impossible," Plax exclaimed, his voice rising to the upper registers of translator capability. "Nothing could survive in an environment so saturated with toxic compounds. The atmospheric readings alone show multiple substances that would be banned in civilized space." Krill X adjusted his protective suit nervously, even though they were safely aboard their ship. "And yet, here we are. The most concerning readings are coming from these." He zoomed in on a biological scan. "Some kind of elongated creature. They appear to be everywhere, and their bodies are literally composed of deadly neurotoxins." "Fascinating!" Plax began taking notes on his datapad. "Could they be some kind of biological weapon?" "That's what worries me. The dominant species appears to be some kind of bipedal mammal, but they share their habitat with these toxic creatures. It defies everything we know about ecosystem development." The ship's AI interrupted their discussion. "Chief Scientist, I've completed my analysis of the planet's information networks. You may find this disturbing." "More disturbing than deadly toxin creatures? Do tell." "The bipedal inhabitants, who call themselves humans, not only coexist with the toxic creatures, they study them. They have specialized facilities dedicated to collecting and housing the most lethal specimens." Plax dropped his datapad. "They collect them? On purpose?" "Affirmative. They refer to these specimens as snakes. The most toxic variety can theoretically produce enough venom in a single bite to kill 3,000 of their own species." Krill X's eye stalks all focused on a single point as he processed this information. "And they keep these things as research subjects?" "Not just research subjects," the AI continued. "Some humans maintain them as companions in their living spaces." There was a long moment of silence on the bridge, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. "Well," Krill X finally said, straightening all his appendages in what his species considered a gesture of scientific determination, "this clearly requires further investigation. Plax, prepare the long-range observation equipment. We need to document this properly before we even consider making contact." "Yes, Chief Scientist. Should I activate the emergency containment protocols?" "Activate everything. Maximum safety settings. If these humans have found a way to survive among creatures that should have wiped them out eons ago, we're either dealing with an extremely advanced civilization disguising itself as a primitive one, or what, Chief Scientist? Or we've discovered something that will rewrite every xenobiological principle we thought we understood. Either way, we must proceed with extreme caution. The last thing we want is to attract the attention of a species that keeps death itself as a pet." After 3 days of intensive observation, the research team aboard the Prudent Curiosity had compiled what Chief Scientist Krill X considered the most disturbing documentary footage in the history of xenobiology. He'd just finished watching another video segment, this one featuring something humans called a snake handling demonstration. Play it again, he ordered the ship's AI, all 4 eye stalks fixed on the screen in horrified fascination. The footage showed a human male casually lifting one of the deadly creatures with nothing more than a metal hook and his bare manipulator appendages. The human was actually smiling while doing this. Notice, Plax pointed out, reading from his notes, how the human makes no attempt to activate any protective force fields or chemical barriers. They appear to rely solely on something they call training and experience. Madness, Krillex muttered. Complete madness. Have you compiled the data on this particular specimen they're handling? Yes, Chief Scientist. According to Earth's scientific databases, this is an inland taipan, what they classify as the most venomous terrestrial snake. A single bite contains enough neurotoxins to kill approximately 250,000 of their small, furry companion species, or around 100 of their own kind. And they're teaching others how to handle it. Correct. This appears to be some kind of educational facility called the Australian Reptile Park. The human demonstrator is Dr. Jack Cooper, their lead herpetologist. Krillex's bioluminescent patches pulsed with stress. What? Herpetologist, a scientist who specializes in the study of reptiles and amphibians. Dr. Cooper has apparently been working with venomous snakes for over 20 Earth years. 20 years? How is he still alive? That's not even the most concerning part, Plax continued, his voice trembling slightly. According to my research, they deliberately extract the toxic compounds from these creatures to create something called anti-venom. They harvest the toxins voluntarily? Yes, and then they inject modified versions into other species to create defensive compounds. It's a whole industry. They've been doing it for over a century. Krillex slumped in his gravity chair, all appendages going limp. A century of deliberately handling the most toxic creatures on their planet. This cannot be a primitive species. It must be some kind of elaborate deception. That's just it, Chief Scientist. By all other measures, they are primitive. They haven't even achieved unified planetary governance or regular interplanetary travel. They still burn fossil fuels. The ship's AI interrupted their discussion. Chief Scientist, I believe I've identified an optimal opportunity for first contact. Dr. Cooper is scheduled to be alone in his research facility tomorrow morning, performing routine maintenance on their snake housing units. Alone with multiple toxic specimens? Standard procedure for their facility, apparently. Krillex's eye stalks all turned to face different directions, a sign of extreme cognitive distress in his species. Finally, he pulled himself together. Very well. If we're going to understand this bizarre situation, we need to speak with one of their experts. Prepare the emergency containment field and the triple-layered protective suits. Plax, you're with me. Me? Plax's bioluminescence dimmed to nearly nothing. Couldn't we just send a drone? Absolutely not. This requires direct scientific observation. Besides, their primitive sensors shouldn't be able to detect our protective technology. We'll be perfectly safe. The next morning, Dr. Jack Cooper was indeed alone in the reptile house, carefully cleaning the enclosure of a particularly grumpy tiger snake, when a shimmer of light caught his attention. He turned around to find himself face to eye stalks with 2 aliens in what appeared to be hazmat suits, straight out of a sci-fi movie. "G'day," he said, with the unflappable calm that comes from spending decades handling some of the world's deadliest creatures. "You folks must be new. Health and safety's really stepping up their game with those suits." Krillex and Plax exchanged glances through their protective visors, their translator struggling to process the human's accent. "Greetings, Dr. Cooper," Krillex said formally. "We are researchers from quite far away. We have some questions about your work with toxic specimens." "Oh, you mean the snakes?" Jack gently placed the tiger snake back in its enclosure. "Happy to help, though you really don't need those suits in here. We've got safety protocols and anti-venom on hand." Plax made a sound that the translator couldn't quite process, somewhere between a squeak and a whimper. "No protective equipment?" Krillex's voice rose several octaves. "But how do you prevent contamination from their deadly neurotoxins?" Jack scratched his head. "Well, step 1 is not getting bitten. Would you like to see our venom extraction facility? We're actually due to milk the taipan this morning. Milk the... You mean you're going to manually extract toxins from the deadliest terrestrial creature on your planet? Today? Now? Sure, why not? It's a pretty straightforward process once you know what you're doing. Want to watch? As Jack turned to get his equipment, Krillex sent an urgent private message to Plax through their suit's communication system. Update the species classification immediately. Any beings who can casually handle Class 9 toxins without protective gear must be operating on a level we cannot comprehend. Plax responded with a single trembling emoji which needed no translation at all. Dr. Jack Cooper had seen a lot of strange things in his career as a herpetologist, but watching two aliens in oversized hazmat suits trying to press themselves through a doorway simultaneously to avoid being left alone was definitely a first. They'd introduced themselves as Chief Scientist Krillex and Assistant Plax, though Jack had to admit he wasn't entirely sure which was which, given that they both looked like disco balls wrapped in bubble wrap. "Right this way," he said cheerfully, leading them toward the venom extraction room. "We'll start with something simple. Just got a new inland taipan in last week, and she's due for her first milking." "Simple?" Plax's translator crackled with distress. "But our scans indicate that specimen is capable of producing enough toxins to—" "Yeah, she's a beauty," Jack interrupted. "About 5 feet long, gorgeous dark brown coloring. Very calm temperament for a taipan." Krillex's eye stalks all rotated toward each other. "You appear to be expressing positive emotions about this creature." "Course I am. She's a wonderful specimen. Here, let me show you." Before either alien could protest, Jack had opened the secure enclosure and, with practiced ease, used his hook to gently guide the snake into a clear handling tube. "Containment breach," Plax screamed, activating some kind of energy shield that made his protective suit glow like a Christmas tree. "Chief Scientist, the human has released the Deathbringer." "Calm down, mate," Jack said, carefully securing the tube. "She's completely contained. See? Now we just need to—" He never got to finish that sentence because Krillex had activated what appeared to be some kind of emergency teleportation device. In a flash of light, Jack found himself inside what was very obviously a spaceship, still holding the tube containing a rather confused inland taipan. "Decontamination protocols activated," announced a computerized voice. "Warning, extreme biological hazard detected. Emergency containment fields engaged." "Now hang on just a minute," Jack started to say, but he was interrupted by what sounded like every alarm on the ship going off at once. "Warning," the ship's AI announced. "Protective barriers insufficient against detected toxins. Evacuation recommended." This led to what Jack could only describe as an alien panic attack. Krillex's appendages were waving in all directions while Plax appeared to be trying to hide behind him, despite being roughly the same size. "The barriers won't stop it," Plax whimpered, "but they're rated for stellar radiation." "Remain calm," Krillex ordered, clearly not remaining calm himself. "The human has survived prolonged exposure. They must have some kind of protection we can't detect. Dr. Cooper, please share your defensive technology specifications immediately." Jack looked down at his khaki shorts and polo shirt. "What, these? Mate, this is just standard park uniform. Look, if you're worried about safety, I can demonstrate proper handling techniques." "Proper handling?" All of the aliens seemed to shout at once, including the ship's AI. "Yeah, it's really not that complicated. First you need to understand snake behavior and body language. Then it's just a matter of—" "It's worse than we thought," Krillex interrupted. All 4 eye stalks focused on Jack, with an intensity that was slightly unnerving. "They've developed some kind of biological manipulation ability. He's controlling the creature psionically." "What? No, I'm not—" "Quick!" Plax exclaimed. "Check him for cybernetic enhancements." "For the last time," Jack said, starting to get a bit frustrated. "There's nothing fancy going on here. It's just training and experience. Now, if you'll let me demonstrate—" He began to open the handling tube, intending to show them the proper grip for venom extraction. This proved to be a mistake. "He's releasing it into the ship!" Plax screamed, backing away so quickly he slammed into a wall of scientific equipment. The ship's AI wasn't helping matters. Warning: lethal toxin levels increasing. Recommended course of action: jettison affected section of ship. Now don't do anything rash, Jack said, trying to keep his voice calm and steady, just like he did when training new handlers. Everything's under control. Under control. Krillex's voice had risen to a pitch that made the translator crackle. You're holding one of the deadliest creatures in the galaxy with your bare manipulator appendages. In our ship, near our vital systems. Look, Jack said, carefully securing the snake again. I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. Yes, these snakes are venomous, but they're not some kind of supernatural death machines. They're just animals, beautiful, important animals that need to be treated with respect. There was a moment of silence as the aliens processed this. Respect, Krillex repeated slowly. You respect these creatures that could kill you instantly? Of course, they're essential parts of their ecosystems. Plus, their venom has amazing potential for medical research. Did you know that taipan venom is being studied for... They're putting the toxins in their medical systems? Plax fainted dead away, his protective suit making a soft bouncing sound as he hit the deck. Jack sighed and looked at his watch. Right, tell you what. Why don't we all calm down, get your friend there back on his feet, and I'll explain everything from the beginning. But first, we really should get this lovely lady back to her enclosure. She's had quite enough excitement for one day. The human is showing concern for the Deathbringer's emotional state, the ship's AI noted. Updating species threat assessment to maximum level. Jack just shook his head. It was going to be a long day. After 3 hours of detailed explanations about snake handling, venom extraction, and the general principles of herpetology, Dr. Jack Cooper had managed to achieve what he considered a minor miracle, getting the aliens to stop screaming every time he moved his hands. Plax had even stopped fainting, though he still refused to come within 10 meters of the snake-handling equipment. So you're telling us, Krillex said, all 4 eye stalks focused intently on Jack, that your species just figured this out? Through trial and error? Well, there were definitely some errors in the early days, Jack admitted. But that's why we developed proper safety protocols. Speaking of which, would you like to see a proper venom extraction demonstration, since we're here anyway? The ship's AI chimed in. Caution advised. Previous demonstrations have resulted in Assistant Plax requiring emergency sedation. No, Krillex waved several appendages thoughtfully. I believe it's time we approach this scientifically. If humans have mastered this technique, surely we, with our advanced technology, can learn to understand it. Plax's bioluminescent patches flickered in what Jack was starting to recognize as anxiety. Chief Scientist, are you suggesting... Yes, Plax, prepare the auxiliary research lab. We're going to document this properly. 20 minutes later, Jack found himself in what looked like a cross between a medical bay and a doomsday bunker. The aliens had installed no fewer than 12 different types of force fields, and something they called a quantum containment grid hummed ominously in the background. Right, Jack said, looking around at the dramatically overcomplicated setup. First things first, we'll need to turn most of this off. Can't properly handle a snake through a force field. But the safety protocols, Plax protested. The force fields stay, Krillex declared. We'll observe first, then gradually reduce protection levels as we understand the technique. Jack shrugged. Suit yourself, though I should mention that some of these energy fields might agitate the snakes. Snakes, plural? The translator couldn't quite capture the squeak in Plax's voice. Well, yeah. I brought up a few different species to show the varying techniques required for... Hang on. What's that sound? A low hum had started emanating from the containment cases holding Jack's snake collection. The quantum, whatever it was apparently having an unexpected effect on the specialized transport containers. Fascinating, Krillex said, moving closer to examine the cases. The containment units appear to be resonating with our defensive grid. Plax, adjust the quantum harmonics to compensate. I really don't think that's a good idea, Jack started to say, but it was too late. Plax had already started pressing buttons on a nearby control panel. The hum grew louder, then with a sound like a champagne cork popping, All the containment cases sprang open simultaneously. "Oh, brilliant," Jack muttered as several very confused snakes began exploring their new environment. "Everyone stay calm and don't make any sudden moves." This turned out to be exactly the wrong thing to say to a ship full of panic-prone aliens. "Multiple containment breaches," the ship's AI announced, helpful as ever. "Detecting 12 independent sources of lethal toxins. Initiating emergency protocols." "Override," Krill X shouted. "We need to maintain observation conditions." "Belay that override," Plax countered. "Maximum protection required." The resulting conflict between emergency systems created what Jack could only describe as a force field disco party. Energy barriers flickered on and off in random patterns, creating gaps and corridors that the snakes naturally began to investigate. "Now look," Jack said, trying to maintain some professional composure. "If everyone would just stay still and let me handle this." He was interrupted by a brown snake slithering past Plax's feet, causing the alien to leap nearly 2 meters straight up, crash through 3 different force field layers, and land directly in the path of a rather startled tiger snake. "Don't worry," Jack called out as Plax began running in circles. "She's more scared of you than you are of her." "Impossible," Plax screamed, still running. "Nothing in the universe is more scared than I am right now." Meanwhile, Krill X was attempting to use his multiple appendages to operate several control panels simultaneously, which might have been more effective if he hadn't been doing it with his eye stalks squeezed shut in terror. "Ship's computer," he yelled. "Activate the emergency teleportation system." "Unable to comply," the AI responded. "Quantum field interference preventing safe transport. Also, there is a snake on the control panel." "What?" Krillex's eye stalk snapped open to find himself face to face with a curious inland taipan that had decided his control station looked like a nice basking spot. Jack had to admit he'd never heard a scream quite like that before. "Right," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "This has gone far enough. Computer or AI or whatever you are, shut down all force fields and containment systems immediately. Warning, that action contradicts all known safety protocols. Your safety protocols are making things worse. Trust me, I'm a professional." There must have been something convincing in his tone because the ship actually complied. As the humming fields disappeared, the snakes began to calm down. "There we go," Jack said soothingly, already moving to carefully collect the nearest snake. "See, they're settling now that all that energy interference is gone. Though I have to say, this'll make quite an interesting addition to my research papers, assuming anyone believes me." "Papers?" Krill X had managed to climb onto a high shelf, all appendages tucked in tightly. "You're going to document this incident." "Course I am. First recorded instance of snake behavior in 0G conditions. That's a career-making observation right there." 0G, Plax's voice was faint. "The artificial gravity systems are failing too." Jack looked up, or what had been up a moment ago, to realize that yes, the gravity was indeed starting to fluctuate. Apparently, they'd managed to knock out more than just the force fields. "Well," he said, watching a death adder do a graceful loop-the-loop in mid-air, "this just got a lot more interesting. Don't suppose any of you know how to juggle. Might come in handy for the next bit." The only response was a whimper from somewhere near the ceiling, followed by the ship's AI announcing, "Update. Previous species threat assessment may have been insufficient. Humans appear to find mortal danger entertaining." Jack just grinned as he launched himself off a wall to intercept a floating python. Some days he really loved his job. Floating upside down in a zero-gravity environment while trying to wrangle several highly venomous snakes wasn't exactly how Dr. Jack Cooper had planned to spend his Tuesday morning. Still, he had to admit it beat doing paperwork. "Got another one," he called out cheerfully, carefully securing a rather confused coastal taipan in one of the few undamaged containment units. "Only 3 more to go. How's everyone holding up?" "Define holding up," came the ship AI's response. "Chief Scientist Krill X is currently clinging to the main computational core. Assistant Plax appears to be trying to merge with the ceiling panels, and ship systems are operating at 47% capacity. Could be worse, Jack said, using a wall for leverage to propel himself toward a gently spinning death adder. At least the snakes seemed to be enjoying themselves. This was true. The snakes had adapted to zero-G conditions with remarkable ease, though their swimming-like movements through the air were creating some interesting patterns that probably wouldn't make it into any scientific journals. Enjoying themselves? Plax's voice cracked. The Deathbringers are plotting. They've achieved three-dimensional mobility. We're doomed. Nonsense, Jack replied, deftly catching the death adder. They're just curious. Snakes are actually quite adaptable creatures. Did you know that sea crates can— Please, Krillex interrupted, his eye stalks peering out from behind a cluster of cables. No more snake facts. How much longer until they're all contained? Jack did a quick count. Just 2 more now, though we really should talk about your containment protocols. I couldn't help but notice that your force fields actually made things worse. Worse? The translator struggled to convey Krillex's tone of disbelief. How could proper safety protocols possibly make things worse? Well, for starters, all that energy was agitating them. Snakes are sensitive to electromagnetic fields, plus your quantum what's-it thingy. The quantum containment grid, the ship's AI supplied helpfully. Yeah, it literally broke all my transport cases. Speaking of which, Jack paused to intercept a brown snake that was investigating a particularly important-looking control panel. You might want to reconsider your whole approach to biological containment. Sometimes simpler is better. There was a long pause, broken only by the soft swishing sound of scales on air. Simpler? Krillex's voice was thoughtful. You mean like your primitive but apparently effective wooden boxes? Exactly. Though we usually use clear acrylic now, better for observation. The point is you don't need fancy energy fields, just proper materials, good design, and understanding of the animal's behavior. Fascinating, Krillex muttered, emerging slightly from his hiding place. Our entire approach to containment has been based on overwhelming force rather than behavioral adaptation. Plax, are you recording this? Yes, Chief Scientist, came the weak reply from somewhere above. Though I may need medical attention soon. I believe I've developed several new anxiety responses. Retio, last one, Jack announced, moving smoothly through the air to retrieve the final snake, the original inland taipan that had started this whole adventure. Once she's secured, we can work on restoring your gravity and other systems. You understand our technology? The ship's AI asked, managing to sound both surprised and suspicious. Nah, but I know what buttons they pressed before everything went haywire. Sometimes solving problems is just about working backward from the mistake. This prompted another thoughtful silence from the aliens. Working backward from mistakes, Krillex repeated slowly. Is that how humans developed your mastery over toxic creatures? More or less, Jack said, finally getting the last snake safely contained. Lots of trial and error over the years, though these days we try to minimize the error part. And the knowledge gained from these trials, it has medical applications? Oh yeah, loads. Snake venom is incredibly complex stuff. We've developed all sorts of treatments based on studying it. Anticoagulants, pain medications, even potential cancer therapies. Krillex's eye stalks all swiveled toward each other, which Jack had learned was their equivalent of wide-eyed surprise. You're telling us that you not only survived these toxins, but learned to use them for healing? Course we did. That's kind of humanity's whole thing, isn't it? Finding ways to turn problems into solutions. Plax, Krillex called out, his voice taking on an urgent tone. Update the species classification again. Add a note about their ability to convert lethal substances into medical treatments. And perhaps we should discuss potential research collaboration? What you mean, like an exchange program? Jack asked, grinning as he helped Plax down from the ceiling. Because I've got to tell you, mate, your reaction to our snakes was nothing compared to how humans would react to some of the stuff you probably deal with. Actually, Krillex said, finally floating down from his perch by the computational core, I was thinking we might benefit more from learning your approach. Our medical technology is advanced, but we've never considered using toxic compounds this way. The potential applications? Assuming, Plax added quickly, we can find researchers willing to work with the specimens. Oh, that's no problem, Jack said cheerfully. We've got plenty of trained herpetologists who'd love to study alien biology. Though maybe we should start them off with something simple. You wouldn't believe how excited people get about space snakes. Space snakes? Plax's bioluminescence dimmed alarmingly. Figure of speech, mate, now about that gravity situation. As Jack helped the aliens restore their ship's systems, he couldn't help but smile. He'd started his day expecting routine snake maintenance and ended up establishing first contact, conducting zero-G snake behavioral studies and potentially revolutionizing galactic medicine. Still better than paperwork. Entry update, Galactic Scientific Database, subject Earth, previously classified as Primitive Planet, 3742b. Status, approach with extreme caution. Filed by Chief Scientist Krillex, Research Vessel Prudent Curiosity. Following our recent first contact with the species known as humans, several critical updates to our understanding of this civilization are required. Previous classifications of Earth as a primitive world were based on their limited space travel capabilities and continued use of fossil fuels. This assessment has proven dangerously inadequate. The humans have demonstrated an unprecedented ability to not only survive but thrive among some of the most lethal organic compounds known to galactic science. More importantly, they have developed techniques to handle toxic creatures with nothing more than primitive protective gear and what they call careful attention to proper procedure. Most disturbingly, they appear to find this dangerous work enjoyable. Our initial theory that they must possess advanced biological manipulation abilities or cybernetic enhancements has been disproven. They achieve these feats through what they call training and experience concepts that our xenobiologists are still struggling to fully comprehend. Recommendation: immediate reclassification of humanity as an inexplicably resilient species. Additionally, their medical research programs, particularly in the field of toxicology, warrant serious attention from the galactic scientific community. Dr. Jack Cooper closed the tablet containing the alien report and handed it back to Krill X. 3 months had passed since the incident aboard the Prudent Curiosity, and the resulting exchange program was exceeding everyone's expectations. "Bit dramatic, isn't it?" he said, watching as one of the alien research assistants carefully practiced handling a completely harmless carpet python. The assistant was still wearing 3 layers of protective gear, but at least they'd stopped fainting at the sight of scales. "Perhaps," Krillex admitted, his eye stalks arranged in what Jack had learned was an expression of amusement. "But you have to admit, your species is rather unique in your approach to dangerous creatures. Speaking of which," Jack said, checking his watch, "it's almost time for today's venom extraction demonstration. Sure you don't want to try it yourself? We've got plenty of spare protective gear." "One step at a time, Dr. Cooper, though I must say your training methods are proving remarkably effective. Assistant Plax has almost stopped having panic attacks during the feeding demonstrations." "Progress is progress. How is the medical research coming along?" "Extraordinarily well. Your snake venom compounds have already led to breakthroughs in treating several conditions we thought incurable. Though I'm still not sure about this suggestion to start a captive breeding program. Trust me, it's better than trying to collect wild specimens, especially since you lot nearly had a collective nervous breakdown when you learned about the platypus." "Ah, yes." Krillex's bioluminescent patches pulsed with what might have been embarrassment. "In our defense, a venomous egg-laying mammal that detects electrical signals and has duck features does seem like something designed specifically to confuse xenobiologists. Wait until they hear about the box jellyfish," Jack muttered under his breath. "What was that?" "Nothing important. Look, your assistant's actually touching the python now." They watched as the alien researcher, still trembling slightly, managed to maintain contact with the snake for almost 5 seconds before activating their emergency teleporter. "New record," Jack noted cheerfully. "See, told you it just takes time and patience." "Indeed," Krillex agreed. Though I must ask, are all of Earth's professional fields this challenging? Oh, mate, Jack grinned. Wait until you meet the beekeepers. The sound of multiple teleporters activating simultaneously echoed through the reptile house, followed by the ship AI's now familiar announcement. Warning, Assistant Plax has fainted again. Also, updating species threat assessment, humans are clearly insane. Jack just smiled and went to fetch the smelling salts. Some days he really loved his job.